Broadcasting from the First Rule Film and Broadcast Studios at the University Tower in Brentwood. It's the Big 550 KTRS board meeting, and we are in session. And you can watch us at stltoday.com, the opinion tab. Also, you can watch us at ktrs.com, and you can listen to us on the radio. You can listen to us online at ktrs.com. You can also download the app on your smartphone and listen to us there as well. The board meeting is Jane Duker is a regular attorney, former chief of staff to Governor Holden. Good morning, Jane Duker.
Good morning.
Jay Kanzler filling in for the third week in a row. Tony will be back next week, but we love to have filmmaker, attorney, and reform politician Jay Kanzler. Jay, good morning.
Good morning, all.
And a late scratch, John Deal called out, but State Senator Eric Schmidt filling in for him. Good morning, Eric Schmidt.
Good morning.
We should also say that you are a proud sponsor of Nurses for Newborns, and you continue to be on my good side just as long as you take care of Nurses for Newborns.
Will do.
All right. Duly noted. All right. Yesterday on this program, Bob McCullough called up and said a couple of interesting things about the current grand jury that is going on in St. Louis over the Officer Wilson grand jury, including early November, he expects it to be done. Hasn't talked to Governor Nixon, and is going to give a wide number of options for the grand jury. We have a number of lawyers here at the panel. Jane, we'll start with you. What do you think of what Bob McCullough said yesterday?
No. I mean, I think it's good information for the public to have. I think he's, trying to be very transparent. I think a lot of people were heartened by the fact that if there is a no true bill, meaning the grand jury comes back and declines to indict, that he is going to put every bit of evidence out there, including transcripts, which is not, it's a little different.
Which doesn't happen normally.
Not normally. It has happened before. It's authorized. If the judge signs the order, it's authorized. So I think, McCullough is really, trying to be transparent, trying to do, the people's work, and I think he's doing it well in that regard. And so he was very clear about what participation he had in the grand jury, that he didn't pick the jury. The judge does that he introduced himself and sort of talked procedure with the grand jurors, but he has people in his office that are presenting the case every day. I think he explained the January extension really effectively, saying, if new evidence comes in or something comes up, that having that cushion, it's just good practice.
What about the fact that Governor Nixon hasn't spoken to him at all? What do you make of that?
I mean, it's interesting. I'm not sure I'm surprised. So I think, I think better communication all along throughout this process probably would have decreased some of the angst and some of the sort of PR and communication problems that have occurred.
Right.
So, I think everybody's trying to learn from that. But, yeah, I do think that, that does evidence a lack of communication among elected officials that I think hasn't been all that helpful. One thing I still think is interesting is that candidate Rick Stream won't tell Bob McCullough to step down, but thinks he ought to consider it. And so I think, I think at this point the grand jury is in process. Everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. He's doing his job.
Bob McCullough's not in the room, though. This is two other prosecutors who are doing this.
Right.
That's what I don't understand. What's Bob McCullough going to step down from?
Exactly.
From what? From overseeing the people that are actually doing the work.
Right. And there's no legal reason for it. And so that's why, this idea that we're going to just take well-established processes and just throw them out the window. Mm-hmm. I think he said because 25% of the population don't agree with it. Well, I can guarantee you 50%, more than 50% of the population didn't agree with his votes on gun nullification and some of the other nonsense. So does he lose his seat?
Does everything come back to county politics?
Yeah, pretty much for me.
I mean, she's
just like it comes back to the Senate.
Going after Rick Stream, and Steve Stenger has said nothing, by the way, about any of this, which I think is interesting.
He stood by the process pretty clearly.
I think the question was about the grand jury process, and somehow we ended up about that. But I do think it is interesting that Bob McCullough does know what it feels like to be a member of the General Assembly now, not being able to communicate with the governor.
See, it always comes back to the General Assembly victims.
It is remarkable.
They're victims.
It is remarkable, though, because when we were in our most recent veto session, it was mostly, quite honestly, the Democrats in the Missouri Senate that were expressing their frustration with the lack of communication and on matters that would be pretty simple to resolve during regular session. But I do think as it relates to the Ferguson issue, I've always viewed it as three kind of issues. You've got what actually happened in the court process and the legal proceedings that need to take their normal course. I mean, we have a system, we have an independent judiciary. It's really important that we get all the facts through that process. And then there'll be books written probably about the response and what made sense and what didn't make sense. And then you have the broader issue about our region kind of coming together and figuring out a way forward. But as it relates to the legal process, it needs to be done in a transparent way and in the appropriate way and how it normally is done, so that everybody has the comfort in knowing that it was done by the book.
I think. Jay, do you want to add anything there?
Oh, you want to hear from me?
Yes.
Okay. What I thought was great about Bob McCullough, a lot of things were great, but what I really liked is the fact that he is dispelling some of the misinformation that is out there. We have way too many people, this whole group excluded from that, getting out and saying things and making comments that are just not true. Information that's such that Bob McCullough is in the room, that that they picked this grand jury of whatever makeup it was for this particular purpose.
Right.
That he won't present charges.
He won't present
the
charges.
law.
I mean, just simple misinformation that's been churned and rechurned out there by some of the media and some others, some of the protesters. It needs to get out there. It needs to be cleared up. There is a process. It's really not that exciting, on its face. What they do is pretty straightforward, and when it's all said and done, there will be a decision that's been based upon, a rule of law process that's in place, regardless of whether it's for this particular officer or the next guy down the road that's being charged with another crime.
One of the questions after the interview, you always hit yourself in the head saying, I wish I would have asked. And I wish I would have asked this question, because now it's going to be late October, early November. November 4th is Election Day. If this gets released October 30th, November 1st, November 2nd, right before Election Day, what does that do for Election Day one way or the other?
I don't even know that you can even calculate what that will look like. I mean, it's all new. I mean, so I think I think it's impossible. It's like a jury trial. I mean, it's impossible to know when it's going to be done. You're going to be presenting information, and the prosecutor's office doesn't have control over all the information. I mean, DOJ is still interviewing people. Everybody's still interviewing people. They're still doing, I'm sure, forensic or
but if he's not indicted 3 days before Election Day, and you've got these people screaming and yelling, no indictment, no peace, or he is indicted. And it's 2 days before Election Day. That changes everything.
Well, it could, depending on which way it goes. And I'm not trying to get into a hyper-partisan thing, but Steve Stenger does have some issues right now with his traditional Democrat base, largely a lot of the African-American community in North County. I don't know really how that plays in this. My hope, though, honestly, is that that politics has nothing to do with this process. Right.
Would you hope that they hold it till after election?
You know what? I hope that they do it the way that it would normally go. That if you take the politics aside, all the external questions, that has nothing to do with this being done the right way and in the most transparent way, because you're only going to get one shot at this process, and people are going to look back years from now and armchair quarterback a lot of things. So do it the right way. There's also a parallel investigation with the Department of Justice as it relates to civil rights violations and looking at the Ferguson Police Department. All those things are kind of have a parallel path. But as far as the state charges that may or may not be brought against Officer Wilson, that just needs to be done in the most transparent and appropriate way, so that you can diffuse any criticism after the fact.
And I can tell you, in terms of the length of the investigation, how this is taking, I can tell you without saying who, that I have clients that they are still wanting to interview. I represent people down there, people that might have seen things. So this investigation is still going on. All of the evidence has not been collected or, for that matter, presented to the grand jury. And Eric, as you said, let's let that process
get it right.
Yeah, let's let it take its course.
Sure, but the FBI was holding back results of their investigation because they didn't want to be deemed as playing politics during the primary before all this on a different topic.
Well, and there are DOJ guidelines that they specifically don't issue indictments, especially on public corruption cases, a certain amount of time before an election, so as to not be deemed trying to steer elections.
Right.
And there are no state, similar guidelines in that regard, but, I mean, you don't want to be perceived as playing politics. And, when you really look at this, and you look at the scope of this issue and what happened and how many potential witnesses and how much evidence there is, the idea that anyone would think that this is somehow slow, it's not. I mean, given the scope of this, they are moving with a lot of speed compared to every other criminal case of this sort. And so I it's hard to remind people because of the 24-hour news cycle and how quickly information moves, but this is moving at light speed for similar type situations.
There's 12 people who
we don't want to do it wrong.
There's 12 people who live in St. Louis who are listening to everything, who are watching everything.
They're not sequestered. That's right.
They have lives to live too. They have to go. They have to go to work.
Well, they have jobs.
They got kids to drop off at school. They got family to take care of.
Right.
And their normal grand jury term is over. And so the idea that they've got to take a day off or 2 days off a week from their job, this is already
12 people we don't know are going to decide this.
Right. Right.
But Eric, last word.
Well, and that's what our Constitution sets forth as the process, because we believe as a people, as a country, that you don't have some unaccountable sort of king on high that's going to decide all these things, but you are judged by a jury of your peers. And I think it's really important for us as a region to make sure that process plays out in the right way.
That's Eric Schmidt, state senator, also a supporter of Nurses for Newborns, filmmaker, attorney, reformed politician Jay Kanzler, and former chief of staff to Governor Holden, not reformed politician Jane Duker. 922. The board meeting continues on KTRS.
Legendary